master plan really kicked off in 2019, and a steering committee was appointed by the Board of Selectmen. They are listed here, and the intent was to capture a cross-section of folks who volunteer in town with their different interests. So we have the select board, a couple members of the Housing Trust, 2 members of the Planning Trust, Suki Werman from the Environmental Committee, Olga, Lucy has participated a lot since we began this phase of kind of community outreach, and Elliot Morse from Finance Committee. We did have 2 high school students involved until they graduated in the spring. Yeah, which was really cool. And both Adam Davis and Alan Burrows from Shakespeare and Company to kind of represent the cultural institutions of town, and Rob Murray, who is president of the Lenox Chamber. And we did work with the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. That's who Phil is here. And Laura Brennan and their director, Tom Matusko, have also helped.
And I will say also, the steering committee was worked pretty well together. Like everyone, pretty much everyone always showed up and was highly engaged in it. The reasons it's taken this long is basically we had a big interruption because of COVID while everybody was
paralyzed. The pandemic. Agreed. Yeah, and so there's 2 previous master plans in Lenox. The first is from 1968 and the second from 1999. So this is the first update in some time, and it's really guided by state law, which tells us what needs to be in the master plan, and it's really meant to guide our physical development and growth in Lenox. And this is just a quick summary of the timeline and our process. And where we are so far is right now we're doing our community engagement. We haven't gotten really robust participation. We've been doing everything virtually. So we're thinking about how to address that and kind of keep moving forward. The hope was to, and I think we still can, is to have the select board and planning board adopt the plan sometime in June. And so the way this was all developed was we did kind of started with information gathering and data collection, and then went to what we called core assessment teams, who are kind of local experts in that area and stakeholders in the community. And then staff developed chapters that was reviewed by the steering committee. And so that's what we're doing now, is we're trying to get input, identify priorities from everybody to really guide implementation. And then we'll have a second draft available for public comment in the coming month or so. And we do hope to share kind of a very brief presentation and materials at May town meeting, especially if it's in person. And then what we're thinking of at this point is maybe there will be an implementation committee to kind of make sure the plan has legs and is moving forward over time. And certainly the goal is to not wait so long for the next review and update. Like we waited since 1999. The next time we would try to do a 5-year review and update to make sure everything is still relevant in the plan.
I think that also, excuse me, as we talked about it, was going to help us incorporate the latest census information being out too. So we're always sort of off cycle with that.
That's another kind of challenge is the 2020 census information.
Anyway.
So we're working off of the most recent, the 2010 census, and then the most recent American Community Survey data, which isn't as accurate as the census information. And so once we do get the new 2020 census information, the hope is we will have we'll do kind of a supplement review and make sure nothing that's in the plan currently has changed dramatically. And if it has, we'll explain it. And then just for in case if people aren't familiar with it, each chapter of the plan has its own vision. So we'll just put this here. And I think really what came across and comes across very strongly in the vision statements, which were developed by the steering committee, are some common themes. And I would say it's really about being sustainable, being inclusive and equitable, maintaining what makes Lenox unique and a wonderful community, but preparing for the future, especially things like climate change, and trying to be more inclusive and diverse in both who lives in Lenox and who visits Lenox, and helps support the economy. And of course, diversifying the economy so the town's eggs are not all in just one basket. In cases like the Great Recession or with the pandemic, people have seen more how kind of tourism-based economic sectors can be harder hit than others. And so just to take a look at kind of what keeps coming up in the vision statement. We talk a lot about preservation, accessibility, inclusion. I think there was an early question, an early discussion really thought about, are we catering to just tourists, or we really want to cater toward full-time residents, and making sure amenities and services are really supporting the year-round population and accessible to the year-round population.
Hey, Gwen, is this, what do we call these things again?
It's a Wordle.
Is the Wordle really drawn from putting in all the vision statements?
Yes.
Oh, cool. I like it.
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah, great question, Pam. That was what I was like, oh.
I mean, I think we make a poster. We could make a poster of this.
Yes, we could.
Mm.
So one aspect of the master plan that is required is an implementation chapter, which talks about how the town is going to implement all of the great stuff in the plan. And you're really supposed to show a schedule. So is it a short-term, midterm, or long-term project or initiative? And kind of who owns it, who will be implementing it. And we like to add kind of a rough cost estimate too. I mean, those can always change. And then for this one too, we're going to put down, is it something that the municipality alone can kind of lead or implement, or is it something that's better served by a partnership or collaboration with some of our regional or local organizations? And I think we're really eager not to see the plan sit on the shelf. And I think if you look at the 1999 master plan and the many community plans that Lenox has developed, you know, for the village center, for the Gateway District, for the Route 720 corridor, our Complete Streets plan, the historic preservation plans, they really don't sit on the shelf. The town really works to implement them. And these are just examples, whether adopting our cultural district or putting complete street traffic calming measures into the village center. Those are just examples of things we've done recently to implement plan goals and actions in other documents that reflect the vision and kind of desire of the community. And so what we're working on right now is we have a table that shows every goal and objective in the plan and every action that's been identified. And we're working on filling it out by time frame, cost, priority. If it's a municipal action, what action is it? And then who are we working with to make it happen?
Hey, Gwen, are these rank ordered? Did we intend these to be rank ordered, like under each goal?
Well, here's the deal. That's actually what we were hoping to poll people about tonight. Because in the plan draft now, we've had priority goals identified.
Yeah.
And we haven't really ranked actions. So that was one thing we were going to do if we had a larger group this evening, was make sure everyone agrees with our priority goals. So in land use, there's 6 goals, 4 have been identified as priorities. And then what I took a shot at doing was I just went through and tried to grab a couple actions from each of the priority goals and what seemed like rose to the top in our conversations as the most important or priority actions to pursue.
I think it's going to be hard to prioritize because also you have different groups working on different things. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a challenging, normally, and I was talking to Phil about this earlier, normally what we would do is we'd have everything up on a poster board for you, and we just like invite everybody to town hall. There'd be posters up and little stations where we would explain the chapters, explain the goals, objectives, and then people would go and rank things on their own. But why don't we just walk through? You can see the screen and we can kind of take a look at the priority goals in land use and kind of looking at the actions that have been developed. It seems so the big one is really, we want to keep protecting and enhancing and celebrating the community's abundance of natural, historic, and cultural resources. And so in listening to the many different stakeholders and conversations that we've had, over the past month or two, it seems like there's still, people have priority protection areas or priority conservation areas, and there's priority recreation concepts. So it's kind of, we need to more clearly identify what is going to be conservation or preservation versus a recreation opportunity, and making sure we're sensitive about that. And this is a carryover from the open space and rec plan. But when there is a priority property for sale, really, either if it's the town using our CPA funds or seeking state grant monies or working with partners like Mass Audubon or BNRC, or the land trust, like trying to be proactive in protecting that land through an outright purchase or a CR or some kind of easement.
So Gwen, I've always felt as a priority for the planning board, because it's part of our mandated responsibility, is that there should be a secret list of all properties in town that we'd like to purchase, either when they come up for sale or proactively go out. And the reason I say it can be a secret list is because that kind of thing is protected under executive session. And you wouldn't want, you kind of wouldn't want it known that you're a contender for those properties. But I mean, I think that would include, not just preservation, conservation land, but also, like you said, recreation. It could be, places for parking lots for affordable housing, things like that. Like if we did a one fell swoop review, we could try to, identify, here are parcels we want to be, watching out for if they come on the market or that we want to go after next for all these different purposes. And, that was something that was on the planning board's list for sure. Because sometimes they just get away from us, right? And then we're like, darn, we missed that one.
Yeah.
Can I ask question on that? Or do you guys, do you want questions at the end, or can I ask?
Yeah, you can ask.
Sure?
We'll go through by topic area. So this is a good time for questions.
Okay. So part of the reason why I'm joining so late in the game, and I'm really sorry because we've lived here for 8 years, but 2 properties come to mind specifically that I think to myself, how did this happen? One is the yellow, what's the address? It's West Street. I think of it as the Cozy Nook property.
Cozy Nook, yeah.
And I know there were a lot of people that really opposed, I think, the purchase and also then the goals of the owner. And then when it was torn down, and I sit there and I go, how did this happen? We have layers and layers of boards who are supposed to be overseeing this stuff, and it just happened. And then the other one is that the newest one I've heard about is One West, where the Almgren law office is. And, I don't know them. I'm not, none of this is personal, but I do know that they put in a petition to add additional buildings on their property. And that vista is just so beautiful. And I know I don't think they're allowed to by zoning because of their parcel, but I know that it's coming through. And now that I'm on the ZBA, I've seen that, I'm not sure that the, decisions are always really good, to be honest, but I'm only one person. So I don't want to see that pass as an exception. Because in the face of everybody, you could talk to 15 people, they would all say, why on earth would we let that become, a multi-property building? But we see it happens.
And that's certainly a good tool. For like the master plan can be a tool to help entities like the zoning board make and uphold their decisions. If something kind of that doesn't fit with the town's goals comes before the board, they have a better, they have more of a leg to stand on if they're going to deny a special permit. So they can use information in the master plan to help build their decision if they're approving something or denying it. It's a helpful tool in that sense. And that has come up in the past public meetings too, is thinking about how can we adopt some kind of like a view shed bylaw, or some kind of like a tighter protection for scenic views and scenic resources.
Yeah.
You have the Scenic Mountain Act, but in the case of something like One West Street, it doesn't, the criteria are very narrow. It's basically based on elevation and your like how much steep slope you have.
So it's like it just misses the
technicality. So it doesn't actually protect like the view from a place.
Yeah.
That one was pulled though. That petition was, I had a letter ready to go to the ZBA on that saying this is not allowed by the zoning bylaw. I'm chair of the planning board, Kim. I had a personal letter ready to go on that one, but then
they
the petition was
application. Yeah, and I'm not sure why.
Well, I heard they were going to put it back, so that's why I raised it. Yeah.
Well, maybe they could split their parcel or something and do it. I don't really know. Or I think it was a zone issue. I can't remember.
They're in the R1A zone and they're trying to create a multifamily, like two multifamily.
It's a district issue. They're in the wrong district to do it. So I think that all of these, and then relative to Cozy Nook, I don't exactly know what the answer to that is, but it was a private property sold to another private holder. So I think it's a matter of the volunteer groups working with the town to identify those kinds of things as priorities, and whether the town's going to swoop in and buy properties that are threatened like that. So it's tough, but I think, again, from a planning board standpoint, I'd like to see a list. So which wouldn't have captured Cozy Nook. Maybe that needs to go into the historic part of the plan.
Well,
to
since
integrate.
Cozy Nook was demolished, it was too late, or it preceded the adoption of the demolition delay.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
That was kind of, I think.
But the DD
was-
would not have stopped the demolition ultimately.
It could have.
necessarily.
It buys you time. So the groups who have said they wish they would have saved it, or they could have saved
Okay.
it,
The town could have.
they could have
purchased
raised
it,
money,
right.
or they could have figured out a way.
Yeah, you're right.
That's the point of demo delay, is to buy you that time,
Yeah.
But you
try
have
to preserve a property and
Okay.
pursue an alternative versus just going right to demolition.
You're right. You're right.
I'd like to throw in a comment here, because we do know from past experiences with Chris Skelly coming out and talking that you can, if there are very specific parcels, but they're not sort of in a zone type of situation, you can throw some sort of historic preservation on a single building, single parcel.
It
think.
would be a historic, you can have a single parcel historic district.
And it may be that we want to do something like that because we do have these interesting buildings, but they're not all in the historic district and certainly not all gathered in one place, but they're pretty meaningful to people in town. So I think that might be something, the historic commission could look at or champion. I don't know if we've got that as any sort of a goal to work towards that sort of blanketing of the town with these little kind of one-shot protections, but it would help.
Yeah.
So
So
Pam,
something
I
to
think
consider.
having the planning board come up with a list is wonderful. And it isn't that hard because all of the mapping already exists that helps identify what properties can be priority preservation, which makes sense for conservation, and which would be best suited for recreation or whatever use you want to pursue. There's different mapping that has been done that kind of shows you what is suitable land for what purposes.
Right.
Mhm.
And relative to parking lots and stuff, I think we all have an understanding of, generally where some opportunities lie. I think we could do that, but we'd also need to do it sitting next to you, Gwen, to go through. The map and
Of
do
course.
process.
And then, so this is just the future land use map, and kind of the takeaway from the future land use map. It's really retaining the current land use pattern in Lenox and focusing new development, and redevelopment where we already see it today. So along the Route 20 and Route 7 corridor, kind of north of the village to the Pittsfield line, thinking about how we can mimic existing housing style and neighborhood patterns in Lenoxdale to increase housing opportunity. A cool question that has come up is how do we deal with the riverfront in Lenoxdale? It's currently zoned industrially. It's our only industrial zone in Lenox and has some larger parcels and facilities. But one thing that came up at one of our most recent meetings, there was interest in not seeing further commercial or industrial development along the river here, but instead trying to retain it as open space and as access to the river, and focusing redevelopment or new development in Lenoxdale to the south, kind of around the intersection of Walker, Crystal Street, and the Niagara Mill, which is right on the Lee line.
Hey, Gwen, did you read in the newspaper or have you heard Smitty Pignatelli is now talking to someone, the state, about trying to bring the train up those tracks from New York?
Or wouldn't that be fabulous?
Yeah, that's awesome. They've
Oh
been
my
talking
goodness.
about that for a long time.
Well, I guess he's doing it again. He's talking.
Is it?
Yeah, actually,
In
when
our
I worked at PRPC, I helped with the passenger rail station
Study.
feasibility study. Yeah, Interestingly, the Lenox station was not a high priority station at the
Well,
time.
it was in the newspaper, so
The
there you go.
The owners were not really excited about it.
Yeah. But I guess the
But
state owns the line or something.
Yeah, the state owns the rail line now. It's leased to Housatonic Railroad Company.
So Gwen, regarding priorities, I'm sorry, can I interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like in all of the chapters, but I think it also applies to this, hand in hand with open space. I think anything related to climate change, climate adaptation, climate disruption, adaptation needs, and protection needs to be highly prioritized. Like
Okay,
the
that's
wetlands
great.
bylaw, I think we need to be careful about, floodplain zoning, but anything we can do to, protect the carbon sinks that we have and just plan for how we're going to weather climate change and survive climate change, I think is super important. Like it's existential, obviously.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think that and the Rest of River project are two, obviously climate change is the longer and larger scale issue, but it needs to be a priority.
But the governor wants like, what does he want to have happen? And legislature something like close to 50% carbon reduction by 2050. That's not very far away.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, you're right.
In our lifetime, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think we'll get like in municipal services and facilities. That's one of that's two, thinking about how can the town, we are a green community, but how can we further walk the walk? So I'll get to that in a minute. We'll just take a quick look at housing. This is an overarching theme that comes up in almost every chapter, except I'd say culture and history and open space and rec. So the priority actions that seem to rise to the top really have to do with growing the financial resources to help the housing trust do its job most effectively. And thinking about there's town property and there are privately owned parcels throughout Lenox that would offer opportunities for kind of pocket or small scale neighborhood development or redevelopment that could be deed restricted home ownership opportunity. And thinking about how we can keep amending the zoning bylaw to allow housing in some cases at higher density than is currently allowed, but also making sure that the style of house or home fits in with the existing neighborhood, and creating incentives to further encourage young families to buy homes in Lenox. This comes up throughout the plan too, is how can we keep the community kind of sustainable in its age demographic. And so we're not so heavily, so there's a greater distribution of older residents and kind of younger households and families in the community. And there are just some ideas that are mentioned in the actions and that come up when all of the different groups in town start talking. Thinking about working with the owners of these larger properties and working with state programs like the site readiness grant program to make sure if there is a property that seems ideal for housing, that it has the right services, and there is, if it's on town sewer or on town water, there's capacity for new units, working with regional employers like General Dynamics to help them recruit and retain employees, and really marketing Lenox as the ideal community for them to live in. I'm thinking about how we keep growing the financial resources for the housing trust. Right now, they get most of their funds from the Community Preservation Act, but there's different ways to grow that money, whether it's some kind of surcharge on luxury real estate transactions, or earmarking annually some of our tourism revenue or short-term rental revenue or marijuana revenue when the new marijuana business opens on Route 7.
Hey, Gwen, I think that your first suggested priority action about growing the financial resources for the trust is spot on. Because I think from all of our discussions of this, providing deeded affordable housing is kind of like the number one way, dependable way we're going to get young families into town, because the price of our housing is so high. So I think it really makes sense to be realistic and start raising money.
It's interesting because when I was talking to Olga today, and Olga, obviously sits on a lot of different committees, one of which is the CPC, and her reaction is that the kind of the mode of the CPC seems to be very much protectionist, as far as the money, which is really a problem if CPC was designed to help fund trusts and help fund historic resources and help fund open space. That there has to be a way to make the argument more robustly towards those who just see themselves as well, her expression was guardians of the funds, rather than dispensers of useful revenue towards town goals. So that's my comment on that one. Yeah,
I think
can't
it's
do much without money. So
yeah, I think CPA is a tough nut to crack in some regards, and I think it makes sense to try just to augment the just you can't rely solely on CPA. It's not enough, and it's not enough money, and there are other sources in the town.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think too, as we saw with the Blantyre special permit, there's other ways you can work with developers and property owners to grow your resources that way as well.
I guess if you're going to put on suggested priority actions on there, maybe the inclusionary zoning bylaw, reviewing that. But I guess that could include, that's covered in the min.
Yeah, it's included in the plan.
Yeah.
And it's a zoning amendment that,
Yeah,
and I would say that's an ongoing effort.
yes.
Yeah, someone brought up to me not too long ago that I guess a recent application for short-term rentals downtown is part of the problem. I'm not going to say who it was because I don't even remember, but someone raised the issue of saying, if we're supposed to be practicing what we preach as a town and we're trying to do more inclusionary housing, yet we just granted special permits for someone to rent out several second floor units downtown in prime walking distance as Airbnb, then we have kind of a, like a little bit of an issue there. I hadn't thought of it that way. I don't know how that feeds into this, but.
Welcome to our world on the planning board for the past 2 years.
Past 6 years, because I think we start like.
I'll say 4 years. 4 years ago we started on short-term rentals. But yeah,
Okay.
There's a real tension between, in the village itself, there's a real tension between, turning these units into full-time short-term rentals and letting, business people make money that way and potentially bring people into the village to shop and eat, versus having them retained as housing units. Mm-hmm. And one of the, so it's a tension.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it links to economic development, because the number one goal is to support and revive the tourism industry to help restore overall economic growth in Lenox. And so, and that goes back to the tension like Pam described of is Lenox isn't just a tourist destination, right? Like it's also a home for people. So making sure we're supporting the business community and trying to promote economic growth and stability, but also making sure that
real people can live here still?
real people can live here, yeah, and the
You have a
workforce can live in Lenox.
It's tough.
Yeah,
But I'm glad that that's come to your attention, Kim, because you are in the ZBA where the decisions on many of these things are kind of weighing and balancing.
I'm definitely learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for speaking up on that, because that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of the big takeaways from economic development are really year-round promotion of the community and making sure there's year-round activity and attractions to bring people to Lenox that also serve residents, and making sure we're ready to welcome businesses and new residents with the right infrastructure for our time and the future. So cell service is limited. We've heard comments about the lack of affordable and adequate high-speed internet for some of our cultural institutions and local businesses. And certainly thinking about site readiness, how can the town encourage the reuse of tricky sites like the Niagara Mill in Lennoxdale, or some of the parcels on Route 7 and 20 in the Gateway District.
So
Really
Gwen, some
Yeah.
of our cultural institutions say the internet's too expensive for them?
Yes.
What, because they have to get a business plan?
I'm not sure why, Pam. They didn't get into specifics, but they commented that it is a challenge to have adequate internet on their campus. And we've also heard that from the Lenox Library. And I know Mass Audubon struggled for a while to get adequate internet at their facility. And they've all, in our stakeholder conversation with the cultural institutions, you know, like Tanglewood was like, we have our own, like they've taken care of themselves, but thinking about BUTI, kind of the different campuses, they all needed to really pivot or be able to pivot to online programming and offerings this year. And like one comment was that the internet capacity available to them was not enough to support that kind of pivot. And we know, I think some private residents also who would like to work from home or have been working from home find with everyone at home using the internet they do have, it hasn't been adequate enough for the upload capacities.
Yeah.
And so looking at culture and history, this is obviously a big one in Lenox. One of the key actions highlighted in the plan is to adopt an arts overlay zoning district. Oh, hold on. Okay. I'm thinking about how we can better support the creative economy and creative and arts-based businesses through more flexible zoning with really clear standards for people in the village and in Lennoxdale. One thing that is repeated throughout the plan as well is adopting a comprehensive wayfinding scheme to help people who are visiting and residents find their way around town into all of the wonderful open space opportunities and cultural opportunities in Lenox, and connecting them better to local history so they can learn about it as they're moving through the community. Really promoting public art in the village and in other locations, continuing to help encourage adaptive reuse through tools like the estate preservation area bylaw, demo delay. People have talked about affirmative maintenance bylaws. And a big one that keeps coming up too, that really excites people, is having a local shuttle service that would, so people could kind of
At the top of the list.
park and ride. And this would also be good not just for visitors, but it could be useful for residents and employees of our hospitality and cultural attractions in Lenox.
Yeah. On the arts overlay district,
Yes.
one quick question. Is that a case where we're talking about a kind of housing and art space together? I mean, that's more of an urban type of thing. You know, you have your loft living space above your studio or whatever. I mean, are we looking for combo spaces, or is this a little bit different idea?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what kind of form this would take. I think that's up for discussion and some decisions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
on
because
district
we don't.
priorities, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Pam.
On this one, I wonder whether what Kimberly talked about, basically prevent the destruction, do all we can to prevent the destruction of existing historical and cultural resources, should be somehow a priority action as well, because it's like you can't replace these things once they're lost. I don't know if putting that like upfront forward would make sense.
Or could somehow like the arts, the idea of, you know, expanding the creative economy mean that you're preserving some of those buildings for use by creatives? It makes
Well,
me
this
think
is
of
culture.
Soho.
This is culture and history. So history is in this chapter as well.
Yeah, I think of like Soho before it became Soho, where it's like if you gave artists a palette of, you know, those historic spaces, they could not only like live there and work there, but also make them really, really cool. I don't know if there's an opportunity for something like when you said arts overlay, if that's something that could, I don't know, just
Well, I
thinking
mean,
out
that could be something to think of in terms of, you know, if the Niagara Mill were a different, it's a different building, but a space that could actually morph itself into something really exciting like that. I don't know.
Some of the
Having been
existing
inside it, I'm not
campuses,
sure.
like if you're thinking about Shakespeare and Company or the Map, like are there opportunities on these existing cultural campuses to kind of promote a living, working opportunity as well?
that's a good idea.
But
Yeah.
do they not already have that under Great Estates?
Not every cultural institution is actually a great estate.
Okay, so I understand.
Yeah.
So what I was saying though is whether we can let it pass. I think Gwen, you probably heard me. Should a priority action be not to lose any more historic buildings?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, just to flat out say it.
The other question I had was just signs. I don't know. I'm sure it's addressed somewhere because this is really, really thorough, but just like when you mentioned wayfinding, just not having like multiple incongruous signs like throughout town, that would be awesome to see. Like one, you know, and I know it's hard, so I give you guys all the credit, but that would be really cool to just see.
Yeah, the goal. So I forget when, it was like 2010, the town did a village improvement plan and they actually had a comprehensive wayfinding scheme recommended and it just wasn't pursued. But it would have resulted in kind of, you know, a campaign of signs that all looked good together and would have streamlined things and tried to build on the place-based identity of the community.
So can we tweak that one, Gwen? Because I think that's a great idea. Like, you know, just not just comprehensive, maybe it's
From-
adopt
Oh, great.
comprehensive
Here comes
and
Olga.
aesthetically pleasing wayfinding scheme so that we don't
Yeah.
end up with sign pollution.
Yeah, we can emphasize that it will be nice looking.
And the other part would be like making sure to emphasize that it's removing the visual clutter that distracts you from seeing the beauty of the town. Like, because that's what it amounts to, is like, it's just visual clutter. It's like, so, yeah.
Wayfinding without visual clutter.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. That's
I literally read about a study of a roundabout. This is like in Europe, where they took away all the signs in the roundabout, and there was less accidents. There were fewer accidents
Wow.
because people started to pay attention rather than just look at signs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I just want to know I get off on the third turn around.
Yeah.
I was in Ireland recently.
Or it was in a village or something. They took down signs, like they took down all the be careful signs, and there was less.
There was
were
more
fewer
care.
accidents. People
To,
didn't.
like, pay attention.
Yeah, people took it on themselves to like pay attention.
Yeah.
So they slowed down.
Eliminate curbs. People drive slower, they say. That's another whole study that was done at some point, but
It's
let's
counterintuitive, but
be
there you go.
careful here. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if that was in the village improvement plan, and it was, let's do it. It will
Yeah.
cost some money in terms of design and
Yeah.
getting all the different groups
There's
that would like
Massachusetts
signage.
downtown assistance. They have you can apply for, they'll help you. They
Mhm.
basically will pair you with a wayfinding consultant.
And
Oh, nice.
Gwen has already done tremendous work on this. I just also want
Will
to call
help
that out too.
someone
She's done a
Awesome.
Great job.
really assist the town in doing this. And also it's a goal of the cultural district too.
Yeah.
So that would be a natural partner. So that's just an idea. And one thing we don't have in Lenox is a business improvement district. And this is just a way for businesses to kind of band together and everyone puts a little in, but it can help with things like wayfinding, event promotion, just kind of, or smaller physical changes, like the town puts out planters.
Yes.
What we saw this summer was that some of the businesses really took on their own initiative and kind of excitement to transform their outdoor spaces and make them really welcoming and safe. And that's something that you could replicate kind of across the village with something like a business improvement district too.
Cool. Yes.
Yeah, so that's just an idea.
More urban, but I mean, would people feel that was just another ask? I mean, the chamber asks for so much from businesses, the town wants so much for businesses.
It's
then
possible. I don't really know to what extent like the chamber has discussed it, but also remember the chamber, they're not just like their members are throughout town and they have non-Lenox businesses who are members. This would really focus on neighborhoods like the village center, Lenoxdale, and really focus on the businesses that are there on the ground. So it's not just asking the town to do things, it's also kind of everyone pitching in a little bit and getting to really inform how things happen.
Hey, Gwen, I think it's a great idea, except I think that the village businesses would say they pay commercial real estate tax. And that's their contribution already, so.
All right, then it's just a suggestion and
I
a
know.
way to augment resources. I think,
Yeah.
I know they've explored it in greater detail in Great
Yeah,
Barrington.
maybe it's not
so,
about money, it's about collaboration.
Yeah. And maybe
Yeah, I
sort of like if you don't like the barriers that were lent to the town by the sheriff's department for pedestrian safety, then it's saying, well, what barrier, like what would you like? Or
Yeah.
what does entice you to create a more walkable, friendly outdoor space for everybody in the village?
Is there a way to like consider the, I guess, the aesthetics or the physical appearance of the village almost like a public good, and like take tax dollars or marijuana excess tax dollars in order to like improve what's kind of a public good? You know, because everybody benefits from the downtown being like nice. That's a huge draw for people, even if you live here. Is that a thing? I mean,
Sounds wonderful, but it is the thing, really.
Yeah,
okay.
the town invests quite a bit into the village.
Yeah.
In a
More than,
regular year and in a COVID year, like the
okay.
town put a lot of time and resources into making it, trying to make it an attractive and welcoming place, and
Yeah.
this like making it safe for people too. And you can do that like through, so DPW spends a lot of time cleaning it up and putting out the planters and things like that. And then this year it was trying to create all of those outdoor spaces and really promote outdoor dining. And then during the holiday season too.
And just
They do a
before you
great
got
job.
here, Kim, we put in the street lights and the sidewalks. That was a big coup. But
Yeah, that's so beautiful. You know, actually, like, I want to make sure it's coming off proactively because they do a great job. I would pay more, let's put it this way, maybe I'm an anomaly, but I would pay more in my property taxes to give them more funding to do more stuff. Like my husband and I talk about it all the time. We're like, if someone said, will you pay another 2% in property taxes to help the small businesses improve their storefronts and improve the downtown, we'd be like, yeah, no problem, you know? So I don't know, but they do a great job. I'm just
I
thinking,
think
give them
you're
more
an
money,
anomaly, Kim, but about the 2%, but
or, you know,
I'm joking. When
our
is
taxes are pretty low.
Is the Village Improvement Committee active, Gwen, right
They
now?
are not, no.
Well, maybe Kim, you might want to be involved in that one too. There was something called the Village Improvement Committee that was very active for a while, or relatively active for a while, and
Sure.
kind of
Okay.
is defunct right now. So
Okay.
a lot of this depends on volunteer, you know, champions.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Most of this depends, some huge amount.
All right, we'll move on to open space and recreation. And obviously, a big thing here is highlighting our existing recreational facilities in Lenox for year-round awareness and use. And this goes for visitors and residents. There's a lot of open space in Lenox, a lot of recreation opportunity. That's good year-round and has winter opportunity as well as kind of summer, like shoulder season opportunity, but not everybody knows about it. And we know, especially this past year and even before the pandemic, it's been growing, that market for open like recreation destinations. So we're really thinking about, like, we'll keep partnering with BNRC and people like Mass Audubon to work on trail creation and trail expansion where appropriate, and how we connect people from place to place in Lenox, and continuing to build a network and community of advocates and people who are working on things like that, and really increasing environmental awareness and knowledge. So people, it's not just about knowing where the place is, but it's knowing what makes it unique. And for also private landowners, how they can keep their property, how they're maintaining and managing it sustainably, and helping with kind of overall resilience, working with our neighboring communities, particularly Lee and Stockbridge, on open space and rec amenities. Thinking about Lee and even Stockbridge to some extent, how we can keep promoting a shared use path. The goal of the county is to have one that would go from the Vermont line to the Connecticut line.
Oh.
And so how can Lenox how do we build our connection? And so really physical linkages and connectivity. And from a municipal perspective, we have so many different properties in Lenox, and it's how we can manage them for making them accessible and safe, but that we're also doing environmentally the right thing. And this came up at a recent meeting, it's really, we need to make sure there's recreation opportunity for people with mobility challenges. It's not just for the physically fit, advanced outdoors person, but making sure everyone has a safe and enjoyable place to be and recreate. Any comments?
The pier down in Pier 27, I think, in New York, down just like past the Gulf Pier. They did the most tremendous job creating like an accessible park. Like seriously, so amazing. If you guys haven't been recently, I would check it out and totally understand the mobility piece. Everything should be accessible. They just did a phenomenal job. And it was not just ramps, it was like undulating landscapes that all made sense and created seating. So if anybody has a chance to, and whoever the landscape architect, see about them as a consultant for something like that, because it's so beautiful. So
that's awesome. Thank you for that recommendation.
For sure.
So this is Pier 27 somewhere in New York.
We live in that.
It's not that one in Brooklyn. I mean,
it's like just past, like if you go past Brookfield Place and you just walk just down Hudson River path, just like there's a City Vineyards. It's like right at the City Vineyards. And it just got finished, I think, in the fall, like October.
Okay.
But I'll send you guys a couple pictures of it. It's just phenomenal. So
that's cool. We'll just move on to services and facilities now. And so the number one priority goal here, and this is reflected in the vision statement as well, is to really continually improve the quality of education in Lenox Public Schools. And the three actions that seem to stand out were making sure the facilities and the curriculum are contemporary and are really furthering kind of STEM education and opportunities, and increasing access to vocational and technical education, and where appropriate, establishing partnerships with our local cultural organizations so kids can learn, or students can learn, some of the arts and humanities that have local applicability after when they do return home from their higher educational pursuits. And thinking about that too, Kim, you made me think of this earlier, and it's not often talked about. We talk about voc tech opportunities and how those are somewhat limited in the region, but also given that we've become such a hospitality destination, thinking about how we can develop some kind of local or regional pipeline for students who are going into the hospitality industry.
Right on. That would be awesome. Yeah,
and we've talked about that with some of the local hospitality owners, and there's always interest, but it's like actually implementing it. And I think too, because that's a misperception people have, like there are well compensated positions in that field. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity that can be further explored, definitely. And so thinking about what the town does, but what we could definitely do better at is at proactive capital assessments and improvement plans, and making sure we have so many old buildings and facilities in the community, and making sure we're on top of that. And one of the big actions that should be identified, it's thinking about Lenox doesn't really have a facilities director. When we talked to all of the different department heads, they were all, there's no one person you go to. If you have the school superintendent, the library director, kind of everybody said we have these old buildings, old facilities, they all need work. The community center is another example. And everything ends up sometimes happening piecemeal. And so could a facilities director kind of help make that planning process, that evaluation process more streamlined and help us be a little more packaged in addressing challenges in all of our facilities.
You know what,
Monitoring our own municipal greenhouse gas emissions and making sure our own operational practices, and when we do improve or replace facilities, that we're using materials and design that help with climate mitigation, are using green materials and design. We think a lot about like, well, how can we incorporate rain gardens into this if we're talking about wastewater treatment, or water treatment and kind of flood control, reducing our water treatment cost. And then these were 2 actions. They're not discussed in the plan, but they're out there. We know in the future we're going to need to replace our wastewater treatment facility to meet the new standards. And there's also great interest in creating a modern public safety complex. Currently, because our police, ambulance, and fire are all in our early 20th century town hall complex, we have all of our fleet vehicles for public safety end up having to be like custom fit to like even fit into our facilities. The police are down in the basement, and so there's thought that we could have just a nicer, more modern, more efficient public safety complex. Yeah, to help, that would save money in the long run. And the other tool too, it's like, can we modernize just our fleet vehicles in general? So like when DPW needs to replace, or the police department needs to replace a cruiser, or when DPW is replacing a plow truck, can we, we should be looking at the fuel, like could we do a hybrid, or are we getting the most fuel efficient models out there? And also what has come up in our past public meetings, there's a lot of interest in expanding our electric vehicle charging capacity in town. Any comments on this one?
I think it was lovely at the turn of the century when all of those public services were centralized in the village, and now it's like crazy. But
yeah, it's interesting because if we did get this like modern facility, my sense is we'd still have the neighborhood, like we wouldn't lose the neighborhood fire station, like houses.
Okay. Someone was definitely, yeah.
It's also a part of that community, yeah. We'll have to, it's just a thing that, we have to look at and pursue.
When
Yes, Olga.
I'm sorry I'm late. I had clock problems. In talking about the facilities, obviously we're talking about placing the firehouse and the police house in some other area. What is the current
It
status?
would be police, fire, and rescue.
Okay, so what is the current status of the site that they are looking at to?
They did a feasibility study and they identified, I think, two or three sites that were the best suited. One included the sawmill site and one included part of the brushwood property.
Has anything happened?
I think the other 2 sites they pretty much let go. One was along Walker Street, and there were maybe 2 along Walker Street South.
Yeah.
And then the DPW North site. So
those were. The permanent building committee has been, I'm not really sure the status, Olga. But Brushwood Farm is, that's privately owned. It's on the market. It's currently not divided, so.
Great as a brownfield redevelopment, versus any kind of new virgin site. I'd hate to see it be a greenfield for sure.
And then the sawmill property was bought with housing funds, so as long as it's.
Well, that's an interesting point. Has anybody discussed that?
Yes, they have. The town is aware of that. The town knows how they came by that property. And so if anything were pursued to cite something other than housing there, there's steps the town will have to take to
Which one is that?
resolve that. It's at the corner of Housatonic Street and Route 7.
Oh, no, it's across from Caligari.
Caligary's, yep.
Oh, no. That just needs to be turned into preservation land. That's Greenfield. That's Greenfield. Like, why? I'm sorry. I'm a resident.
You and Kate should have coffee sometime.
I'm a resident, so I don't have to play the political game, but no.
You know what? It's a beautiful site, and I totally agree with you. It's a beautiful site. I'll give you a tour of it sometime.
I love it. I've heard lots about that, but Brushwood Farm, Brownfield.
Yeah, Brushwood Farm is an awesome site for redevelopment.
But Kimberly, not necessarily housing.
Was meant for housing. People tried to put a Marriott there before that in Abbott Mall. So
I'll shut up now.
And now it's great salamander and wood habitat.
Oh yeah, the salamander.
And it creates an awesome buffer for some of that neighborhood between themselves and Route 7 traffic.
Yeah, important.
The town actually has some conservation areas that the Sawmill Realty can provide. So there's a very nice buffer there to that property. So anyway.
We'll move on to transportation and circulation. And this is the last chapter of the plan. And so this really built on our 2017 Complete Streets plan. A big action here is to continue implementing traffic calming, and particularly along Walker Street, along East Street between Walker and Housatonic, continuing to promote multimodal improvements throughout town. So that includes a shared use path, and an internal pedestrian path in the village center. The shared use path would start kind of at the Lee line and go up Crystal Street and then follow close to the river, but away from the rail line because they don't want us near the rail line. And it would go up to the Pittsfield line, kind of near, it would follow either the utility corridor or an old trolley right of way. And so we'd end up by the Jidge Dairy Wildlife Management Area. And from there, kind of follow the utility line up to the Pittsfield line, but not Holmes Road. A little quieter area we'd end up at. And so again, the shuttle concept, expanding Council on Aging shuttle service, and really increasing our number of handicap parking stalls in the village center. And DPW has been working on inventorying all of our town assets digitally. That's really soup to nuts. So water line, sewer line, manholes, curbs, just making sure we know where everything is, and it's not just based on institutional knowledge and people who have been here forever. Making sure Lenox has awesome roads and streets and sidewalks. So it's making sure we stay on top of that and being really proactive in the evaluation, improvement, and replacement as time goes on. Are there any comments on this one? Oh, and one thing that is happening too that I should have wrote, like I didn't put this on the slide. One thing that came out of the plan is there's interest in kind of like a bike share and better promoting the community as a bike destination. And so one thing we are doing is we're working, we're part of a group of towns and cities led by BRPC in the city of Pittsfield were looking at the feasibility of a bike share program. These would be like electric bikes. Yeah, and Lenox could definitely be a hub for that because we have so much to do. Yeah, so anything else on this front?
Looks good.
2 things would be less salt and no more asphalt sidewalks. Go back to concrete.
I like that idea.
Yeah, those are good ideas.
I don't know where that falls.
What about the permeable asphalt as
Yes.
That's what I always say, Olga. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of a discussion planners and DPW people have a lot. The maintenance costs of the permeable options can be greater than the conventional materials.
Well,
That's one thing that we have to work on. It's like educating. Also had to encourage, we kind of had to work on support for our curb bump outs and the gently raised crosswalks in the village because there was concern they would obstruct snow removal.
Oh my gosh. Can
And
I
also
just
slow down
Can I
and
just
also slow down
volunteer?
emergency response times.
So
No.
like in my professional career, I deal with capital projects, like large 75, $80 million capital projects, and deal with facilities managers who they do not want, they're very good at what they do, but it's always very logical, rigid. Or if you guys need any support with sort of building bridges, I can give you references. I've done it my entire professional career. I would love to get in there with the DPW and be like,
Our
guys,
DPW is awesome. And
yes.
they are very receptive. And if you they were totally on board with this project. And they're on board with most things. It's just sometimes it's a longer conversation and you just have to keep the rain garden conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We happen to have
but they're very receptive. Our DPW superintendent is awesome.
Conservation guy.
And you just, so you just have to keep at it. Yeah, and the public safety chiefs are really good too. And they just want to make sure everybody's safe. So it's just making sure that we're talking about, you have to please everybody.
Yes.
And figure out how to work the cost thing when it's not in your favor.
Totally. It's just a lot.
But otherwise, I think we do have a lot easier range of discussion around some of those things.
Yeah, I think too, it's even changed over time. Since I started, there's more reception and back and forth about stuff.
That's true.
And less no's.
That's great. Good. Nice job, guys. Honestly. That's
awesome. And we are a complete streets community too. So we always have to look at if we're improving a road or street or replacing infrastructure, we have to consider everyone has to look at how we can add sidewalk or a bike lane. And we're somewhat limited to where we can do that based on road width. But it all works. It's working out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm sure you discussed this earlier, but there are signs that are popping up on the monument.
Yes, we did talk about how we can get rid of visual clutter.
Great.
In the village center.
We worked very hard to remove that huge light that was there. The
October light.
Yeah, that awful light. So then, every once in a while you look over and something new has popped up. So do we have a policy for that sacred piece of ground?
Good question.
No. But one thing we'd like to do is create a wayfinding scheme for the entire community, and this would translate into
Yeah.
a better job at controlling pop-up signs.
Yes.
Olga, I pretty much believe, this is Pam, that in our town bylaws, the general bylaws, we prohibit these little temporary signs, and that
We
you
do,
see
but they
popping
pop
up.
up anyway.
Well, and I do believe that someone takes them down on a regular basis, because you'll see them up by Route 7 also. I have, it's either the police or the building commissioner.
The
somebody
building
takes them down.
commissioner will take down illegal signs.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's good for them. All right.
they just take them down.
But for instance, the cultural
This
sign,
is a bit like whack-a-mole.
the cultural sign,
Cultural district sign is a requirement of being a cultural district.
does it have to be where it is? Because it's sort of ruining the monument.
I don't think it's ruining the monument,
I've
but
had
I think
several
it's a
people-
subjective opinion, certainly.
Well, several
Um,
people have talked to me about it.
Okay.
Wait, there's a cultural district sign at the monument now?
Yes.
And wait till you get back.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Send out
you're
a press
missing
release.
out.
Call a Berkshire Eagle.
It's actually
There are
larger
like
than-
3 of them, at least 3 of them, I think.
Yeah, they send you a bunch and you have to.
Through the heart attack
They
from here.
send you quite a few, like they send you 3 or 4.
I think what we're seeing here is that we don't have a policy, and that we should have one, a standard. We also don't have standards for design. So I think we need to incorporate these things perhaps into,
Those are 2 actions in the land use section, Olga, that really are thinking about, so neighborhood-based design standards to
Yeah.
make sure that, so that what is being built fits in with the neighborhood and can be a more standard-based decision versus some of the discretion we see. And also thinking about more detailed design standards, like the ones we have in our site plan review. You could also think about expanding site plan review beyond the C1A and C3A districts, but to multiples, more zones, more zoning districts.
I like that idea a lot. I think.
I don't know. I have trepidation.
Some larger communities have ventured into form-based code. It's a very long process. It can be complicated, but it's something worth thinking about.
We did some thinking about that. I want to say, like, oh gosh, when Joe Kellogg was around, and it is very complicated. I had a neighbor who was coming up here from Chappaqua, which did change over to form-based, and they would bring me various documentation from that, and it was pretty overwhelming. It's quite a big change.
Well, it's cool. I think the process, it's a process, and you have to do a lot of inventorying and kind of figuring out what you have. So it would be it's not a short project, and yeah, it would be very different than what we have now. So with that, it's 8:30. Any other burning comments or questions, ideas?
Where do we go from here? From a meeting standpoint or at this point? Because I think this was kind of the end of our scheduled meetings.
This is the end of our community engagement meetings. So our next step, we will have a steering committee meeting, and we'll have to discuss there how you want to proceed. Should we have more public meetings? We need to kind of go through the implementation table as a group. Yeah, and then that's our next meeting. Will be a steering committee meeting.
I mean, I'm kicked out now.
No. This will be it will be an open posted meeting in a week or 2.
Gwen, do we want to sort of shift the the goals and the action plan back to the core assessment teams and ask them for priorities, or if they are in agreement, or do we want to do any review with them?
We can do that, yes.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out how we can get more input other than just the steering committee and, the few random citizens who've dialed in.
Yeah, I think maybe what I'll do is maybe I'll invite them to the next steering committee meeting.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Ooh,
And
you
ask-
mean
and I
invite all
have
the
been-
course
They've
assessors?
all been invited to review the plan and come to these meetings and make comments. So if we're not hearing from people at the meetings themselves, they've still been, we're still getting written comments from them,
Mhm.
When
which
is our
Bill
next-
is compiling and organizing for the steering committee.
Do we have a date for this next meeting?
We don't. I will send out a doodle poll or something.
Okay,
Figure out what works for everybody.
okay.
It's nice to meet Kim. Thank you for coming into the meeting tonight. We
Hi.
haven't had many people.
I'm thrilled to be here.
join the
Thank you.
discussion.
You guys are doing a great job. So thank you.
We can always use more volunteers, always, which is really something these days. It's hard to get people. They have so much in front of them to do.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Gwen.
Gwen.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Good
Phil.
evening.
Thanks,
Stay
Pam.
well.
Hi, Olga. Thanks, Pam.
Bye-bye.
you,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.